This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. For the second time in less than 2 weeks, people are outraged at a grand jury decision not to indict a white police officer in the death of an unarmed black man. Today, it is New York City that's bracing for the worst. This incident was caught on video, and these circumstances far different than in Ferguson, Missouri. And President Obama, whose comments against violence were ignored in Ferguson, is already trying to calm things down. This one has led to another federal investigation being pursued by Attorney General Eric Holder. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is in New York tonight live with the latest. Good evening, Rick.
Good evening, Brett. Staten Island calm at this hour outside the DA's office, where a grand jury hearing evidence since late September found no reasonable cause to bring criminal charges against NYPD officer Danny Pantaleo in the chokehold death of Eric Garner back on July 17th, captured on cell phone video. Garner, with 31 prior arrests, was detained for selling loose cigarettes when police tried to handcuff the 6'3", 350-pound man. He resisted. Officer Pantaleo used a choke maneuver to get Garner down on the ground. The hold isn't illegal, but violates department policy. Garner complained he couldn't breathe, and despite the New York medical examiner ruling the death a homicide caused by, quote, compression of the neck, compression of the chest, and prone positioning during physical restraint by police, the jury of 23 found no evidence to bring an indictment. Officer Pantaleo released a statement reading in part, "It is never my intention to harm anyone, and I feel very bad about the death of Mr. Garner. My family and I include him and his family in our prayers, and I hope they will accept my personal condolences for their loss." Tonight, New York Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Chuck Schumer both calling for a Department of Justice investigation, and tonight the U.S. Attorney's Office confirms it will, in fact, launch an investigation into this case. Meanwhile, the President today speaking, it says that many people have lost confidence in the system and that they don't think everyone is being treated fairly.
In some cases, those may be misperceptions, but in some cases, that's a reality. And it is incumbent upon all of us as Americans, regardless of race, region, faith, that we recognize this is an American problem and not just a black problem or a brown problem or a Native American problem. This is an American problem. When anybody in this country is not being treated equally under the law, that's a problem.
We've already seen a couple of protests in New York City tonight. One, a so-called lie-in at Grand Central Terminal with people lying down on the ground, and a gathering at Times Square tonight. A few hundred people were told there at this hour. There are concerns, Brett, that the protests may try to move to the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting ceremony, which is at 7 p.m. tonight, just a few blocks from that location.
Rick Leventhal, live in New York. We'll head back for any breaking details and more with the panel. Thank you, Rick. And now another Fox News alert tonight. The first legal challenge to President Obama's go-it-alone action on immigration is underway tonight. More than a dozen states coming together to take the president to court. Correspondent Casey Stegall has details tonight from Dallas. Hello, Casey.
Brett, good evening. Yeah, Texas is leading the coalition of 17 states total, now challenging the constitutionality of President Obama's controversial executive actions on immigration. The lawsuit just filed in district court today in Texas. Republican State Attorney General and Texas Governor-elect Greg Abbott says he believes even more states will join in. At issue here is whether the president had full legal authority to bypass Congress and shield as many as 5 million illegal immigrants in this country from deportation. Abbott says most everyone agrees the immigration system in this country is in fact broken, but asserts the executive fiat Mr. Obama pulled out is not the right way to fix it.
He himself is saying that he's not trying to fulfill the will of Congress. Instead, he's trying to enact laws himself because Congress will not act. The president does not have that authority.
Now, Abbott called Texas the epicenter of this illegal immigrant issue, since behind California, Texas has the largest number of illegal immigrants currently living in America. But clearly, border states are not the only ones concerned about the president's executive actions. Here's a map of all 17 states participating in the lawsuit. As you can see, Texas is the only one that shares a border with Mexico. So today, Louisiana Republican Governor Bobby Jindal told Brett Baer why he thinks Mr. Obama overstepped his bounds here. Remember, Louisiana is part of this suit.
He has an election where he says, my policies are on the ballot. Purple states, blue states, red states, all across the country rejected the president, rejected his policies, rejected his candidates. Shortly after the election, this president basically, in my mind, pokes the American people, the American voters in the eye. This is the same president who always says, previously had said elections have consequences when he won his election. Now basically ignores the mandate expressed by the American voters and says, I'm going to issue this executive order anyway. I'm going to violate the law, violate the separation of powers.
But the president and his administration have stood by the legality of all of this. Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson testifying yesterday before the House Homeland Security Committee, saying he's, quote, fully comfortable the executive branch has the authority to implement the executive actions.
I've looked at various excerpts of remarks by the president concerning his legal authority to act. I do not believe that what we have done is inconsistent with that.
Now, the lawsuit is not seeking any damages, of course. Instead, an injunction, rather, just to stop these actions from actually going into effect. Brett?
Casey Stegall live in Dallas. Casey, thank you. You can see more from that interview with Governor Jindal tomorrow. Our special look at the possible presidential contenders continues Thursday with a profile of the Louisiana governor. Lawmakers in the House have just voted on a bill that could help determine what your tax bill will look like at the end of the year. It involves the extension of a number of tax breaks that expired in 2013. And as with almost anything else here in Washington, politics are heavily at play. Let's get the latest from Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill tonight. Good evening, Mike.
Well, Brett, good evening. The House passed this temporary extension with huge bipartisan support, 378 to 46 just moments ago. But there is some frustration. They cannot do more now.
Hardworking taxpayers deserve to know whether these tax policies are going to be there year in and year out on a permanent basis.
Facing a massive retroactive tax hike at the end of the year, House lawmakers moved forward with a one-year extension of popular deductions and credits with a price tag of about $45 billion.
America's small businesses and taxpayers are looking for Congress for certainty before they file their taxes in April of 2015.
Some lawmakers expressed disappointment with another temporary fix.
This bill says to the American people that Congress is up to its old tricks. Meet the new Congress, same as the old Congress. Congress says one thing, we need tax reform, but Congress does another, kicks the can down the road.
Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid was working on a 10-year package with House Republicans, which died after President Obama issued a veto threat, irritating Speaker John Boehner.
Well, the president killed him, period.
Reid sounded cautious Tuesday about the smaller fix.
We'll take a look at it and see what else they have in it other than the one-year extension.
For individual taxpayers, mortgage debt forgiveness, a higher education deduction, and a rebate for state and local sales taxes are included. For businesses, there's an extension of the R&D credit, benefits for those producing energy from renewable sources, and a credit for hiring qualified veterans. Speaking at the quarterly meeting of the Business Roundtable, President Obama said he favors a temporary extension and eventually something permanent.
More broadly, we'd like to see if some of those tax extenders provisions, including things that I strongly support like research and development, are incorporated into a broader comprehensive tax reform package.
To do that, the president will need to work in a bipartisan fashion with the next Senate Majority Leader, Republican Mitch McConnell, whom he met with privately at the White House today.
As for the tax extenders, Democrat Senator Ron Wyden is seeking support for an alternative package. If he cannot win over enough of his colleagues, expect the Senate to vote on this House plan next week. Brett?
Mike Emanuel, live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Speaking of money, you and your family owe a lot more of it than you did before President Obama took office. Try 70% more. That's how much the national debt has increased. Chief National Correspondent Jim Angle has some more disturbing numbers tonight.
Aside from the shame of it all, what does an $18 trillion debt mean? One analyst compares it to smoking.
18 trillion isn't a magic number. It's a little bit like one more cigarette won't kill you. But we know if you smoke too many cigarettes, you're more likely to get lung cancer.
When President George W. Bush added more than $4 trillion to the debt, then Senator Obama ripped him for putting so much on the national credit card.
$30,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
Since then, President Obama has been even more unpatriotic, increasing it another $10 trillion. Most analysts expect annual deficits to level off for a few years, but the $18 trillion debt doesn't include unfunded promises in entitlements such as Medicare, which will explode in a few years.
The total indebtedness of this country is in excess of $60 to $80 trillion. It could even be larger than that.
So when all the baby boomers retire and the bills start coming in, it could get ugly. The nation has made huge promises it has no way of paying, not even with tax increases.
If you calculate the implied tax rates to finance those increases, they would consume most of income.
In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that if no changes are made to entitlements, taxes would have to increase by 48% in 2030 and 86% in 2050. So either benefits would have to be reduced or taxes raised to unsustainable levels.
Because we're simply not going to end up, as the arithmetic suggests, turning our paychecks over to entitlements financing.
Basically, we become a government that mails checks to the elderly and has a small army, and that's about it.
Because entitlements, the military, and interest payments of $430 billion a year already will squeeze out all other programs. And the nation needs some flexibility to borrow in case of unforeseen tragedies, such as wars, recessions, and the like.
It's like a homeowner who's way over his credit limit on his credit cards. If his car breaks down and he needs to get it repaired, he can't use his credit card because he's kind of maxed out.
Wessel says we don't know when the U.S. will be maxed out, but we know we're closer than we were 5 years ago. Brett.
All right, Jim, thank you. The Dow and the S&P 500 hit record highs again today. The industrial average gained 33. The 500 picked up 8. The NASDAQ finished ahead 19. Up next, why more of the president's supporters are jumping off the Obamacare bandwagon. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago covering news that the company that makes airbags, which the federal government considers unsafe, is refusing to issue a nationwide recall. Takata is defying a demand from the government to expand what is now a regional recall of driver's side airbags that can explode with lethal force. The company insists the defect is only a threat in high humidity regions of the country. WSVN in Miami, in one of those regions, as a 92-year-old homeless advocate, Arnold Abbott, returns to Fort Lauderdale Beach to feed the homeless in violation of the law. A judge has ordered a 30-day delay on Abbott's fight against 5 citations, which each carry a $500 fine and up to 60 days in jail. And this is a live look at Denver from Fox 31 tonight. The big story there is a winter sports spectacular for wounded warriors. Dozens from all over the country have gathered in Breckenridge to make use of specialized equipment and lessons. Many of those taking part are aspiring Paralympians. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.